Hi again. We're going to continue this discussion with operations with fractions. In the first video we did improper fractions. Proper fractions went from improper fractions to mixed numbers to improper fractions. We added some fractions and we subtracted. The key to adding and subtracting fractions was to get common denominators. I do want to do another example of subtraction, because if you remember, when you subtract whole numbers, sometimes you need to borrow. It's a little different when you are borrowing with working with mixed numbers and fractions. So I'm going to start with 22 and let's say a half, and I'm going to subtract 7 and let's go with, I don't know, 9/16. Okay. Just like when we add or subtract, again, we're still going to need that common denominator. So I'm looking at the 2 and I'm looking at the 16 and I'm looking for a number that they both go into. In this case, that 2 goes into the 16, so that is going to be our common denominator. So I do not need to change this 9/16. So it's going to still say 9/16. To get from 2 to 16, we had to multiply by 8. So when I multiply the bottom by, I'm going to multiply that numerator or that top number by. So that gives me 8/16. Now I want to subtract 9 from the 8. However, I cannot do that, so I'm going to need to borrow. Well, this is gone because that's the 8/16. So I'm borrowing from the 22. So that's going to change that 22 to a 21. Okay, and so here's that 1 that we picked off. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this 1 and 8/16 into its improper form so that I can then subtract from it. So to do that, we take the 1 times the 16. That gives me 16. We add the 8. 16 plus 8 is 24. And we get 24/16 minus my 9/16. And now I can actually do that. So I'm going to take my 24 pieces. I'm going to take 9 of them away. So I might need to do a little borrowing here. So 9 from 14 is 5. So I actually get 15/16 here. And now I can also work with my whole pieces. So 21 minus the 7, need to borrow as well. 7 from 11 is 4. And so I'll get 14 and 15/16. The thing here to remember is when you borrow, we're not borrowing 10, we're borrowing a whole, but we want to make that whole combine with that 8/16. So we need to put it in the right form and turn that into 24/16. So write that as an improper fraction. Hopefully that helps. I know that there are more videos on this topic in that extra video folder. Okay, multiplying fractions is actually easier than adding and subtracting. So is dividing too. So I'd rather multiply and divide fractions any day of the week. So let's take 2/5 and we're going to multiply by 3/8. To multiply fractions, we will multiply across the top and multiply across the bottom. So we can take that 2 times 3 over that 5 times 8, and we get 6/40. Why couldn't all the properties be this way? They're not. Remember, adding and subtracting, we need to get common denominators, then we add the numerators and leave the denominator alone. Or subtract the numerators, leave the bottoms alone. Multiplying, straight across top, straight across bottom, and then we can reduce, if at all possible. We should always be checking, can we reduce our answers? I notice both of these numbers are even, so I'm going to divide both top and bottom. by the 2 and turn this into 3 over 20. Okay. You could do some of that reducing ahead of time. Notice we do something to the top, we do something to the bottom. So if I'm looking at my top pieces, my 2 and my 3, looking at my bottom pieces, the 5 and the 8, I'm going to look for something that they have in common. I see both the 2 and the 8 are even numbers, so I'm going to divide both of these by 2 and write down their new pieces. And now I don't see any other common pieces from tops to bottoms. And now I can do this multiply. So 1 times 3 gives me the 3, and 5 times 4 gives me the 20. Notice we get to the same spot, just a little different route. Okay, so when we're multiplying, we can do some reducing ahead of time. This only works in multiplying. No other operation ever. Not in your adding, not in your subtracting, not in your dividing. Only multiplying. When we multiply improper fractions, or mixed numbers, sorry, improper fractions, mixed numbers. So I'm taking 3 1/2 and I'm going to multiply it by 1 1/4. To do this, we must turn them into improper. Okay, so we must use improper fractions. We can't do the whole parts and the fraction parts. It does not work. I could use some algebra to show you how you'd have to do them, but I know how much you guys like algebra. So we're going to turn them into improper fractions. So the 3 1/2, 3 times 2, 6, plus 1, 7 halves. 1 times 4 is 4, plus 1 is 5 fourths. I'm going to look to see if I can do any reducing. Again, we're looking to numerators with denominators. We can't cancel just denominators. We have to have a numerator and a denominator piece. So here I'm going to then end up multiplying the numerator, multiply my bottoms, my denominators. I get 35 over 8, which is an improper fraction. So we will go back to our mixed number. And that gives me 38 goes into 35 4 whole times, because 8 times 4 is 32, and that means we have 3 left over and an 1/8 large. So look at some of those bad habits that you might have tried and realize you are not going to get to the right answer. All right, so remember, when you're multiplying fractions, you must go to that improper form and then multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. Multiply numerators, multiply denominators. Dividing. We do not divide fractions. We change our problem. And let's say I'm taking 3/5 and I'm going to divide it by, actually let's change it to 4/5. And we're going to divide it in half. So that means we're going to divide it by 2. Okay, so we're going to cut it in half. Divide it by 2. To divide, what we are going to do is we actually change it to multiplication. Change to multiplication by taking the reciprocal of the second. Okay, so that means I'm going to take this 2 and I'm going to flip it. So this normally is written as like 2 over 1, which is a whole number 2. I'm going to take its reciprocal, so I'm going to flip it upside down. The 2 becomes the denominator, the numerator becomes the other piece, And when we do that, we also change the operation from division to multiplication. And now we can do our reducing, because we can reduce when we multiply. So we get 2/5. And if you think about 4/5 dividing it in half, or dividing it into 2 pieces, divided by 2, you should get 2/5 in each half. So another thing to think of is if you divide something by 2, it's the same as multiplying by a half. You're getting half of it. Let's do another one. Let's do 7 1/3, and let's divide it by 2 3/5, and hopefully these numbers aren't too ugly. Okay, to divide, what we're going to need to do is multiply by that reciprocal of the second. However, we need to be able to get these as fractions. So again, just like when we're multiplying, we need our improper fractions. So 3 times 7 is 21, 22. And I'm going to do one step at a time so that I don't screw something up. Many times students like to jump too quickly. A lot of times to do well in math, you want to write the baby steps down. Write down every little detail so that you don't make mistakes. You don't make silly mistakes. All right, so improper, 2 times 5 is 10 plus 3 is 13/5. And I'm going to have ugly numbers. That's all right, it happens. Okay, now we can change that division to a multiplication. And to do that, we invert or take the reciprocal of that second, whoops, there's my silly mistake, second fraction. So that's a 13. I wanted a nicer number. I wanted 12. We look for things that are in common, and there is nothing there. So I'm going to need to multiply across the top and multiply across the bottom. The bottom is 39. 22 times 5, 10, carry 1, is 110/39. Ooh. Let's see. 39 goes in there probably about 3 times. We'll see. 39 times 3. 27. 9. Nope, too big. So it goes in there 2 times. 1878. 110 minus 78. Need to borrow. So 2 32/39. What a beautiful number. This is a good place to stop. Again, so we have multiplied, we've divided, we've added, we've subtracted, we've done all the operations with fractions. Hopefully you guys have gotten a lot better at these. There are more videos in our Blackboard page. Please look at those. If you are still struggling, reach out to me, email me. Thanks. See you in the next video.